Hello, and welcome to a very special weekend edition of Cyberdeck Users Weekly, a bi-weekly show about technology and decentralization. My name is Paul. I will be your host for this evening. I just want to be a little upfront. I'm feeling like really morose about how many people are out of work, and especially seems like the more likely, the more, I don't know. I think the numbers are something like 40% of people. I don't even know the numbers. 40% of people make less than $40,000 a year. I'm bad with numbers. Something like that are out of work in America. And it just, I don't know. That's been like, it's on my mind for the past few days, and it's kind of getting me down. And so I just want to put that out there that's what I'm stressing about, thinking about a lot. But I'm going to talk about video games today and not about unemployment. So there was this Unreal 5 demo on YouTube. I'm guessing you've seen it. It's bonkers. It's truly next gen. You know, I was saying on the last episode of the Vergecast I was on that we're probably going to see a wave of games that are next gen in the sense that they might, use some more effects, basically. They might add some ray tracing. They might do some more crazy shaders for like smoke and fog and wind and rain and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to actually the detail of objects and textures, that's probably going to be a little further down the road, because games that really take advantage of what the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X can do, is that what it's called? Man, I'm so out of it. The next Xbox and the next PlayStation, what they can do, those games aren't really going to even boot on older hardware. Especially if you don't have an NVMe level SSD or better, which is what both Microsoft and Sony are claiming to have in their consoles. But that said, this Unreal 5 demo is very next gen, as opposed to all those Xbox demos, which looked great and had each demo had maybe one visual flair. Some of them had looked very current gen. But this Unreal 5 demo looks just absolutely next gen. The two biggest things, so they have their cool branding. You know, Epic obviously is the company that makes Fortnite. They've been making Unreal Engine for a long time, but they really haven't had a hit since like the I guess the Gears of War series is Epic. Is that right? Oh, right. Okay, that's why I was confused. Epic sold Gears of War to Microsoft, but they've been just plugging away. They tried to like make a pivot. They tried to make a League of Legends style game. They tried to do these mobile games, which were really interesting and graphically interesting. And then their engine actually powers a lot of games. So that's but they haven't had a mega blockbuster, and Fortnite is the blockbuster to end all blockbusters. And so they've definitely, reinvested in their engine with all this new Fortnite cash, and they're doing some really cool stuff. So their buzzwords for this PlayStation 5 Unreal 5 demo are Nanite and Lumen. So Nanite is this idea that you can take an artist asset, like when a 3D artist creates a model, they typically create the highly detailed version of that, and then they paint that, and then that's converted into, I don't know if you can hear these church bells in the background. This is very loud. They convert that into a game asset. Sometimes multiple game assets at different levels of detail. So there'll be like the up close version, and then like the middle distance version, and the far away version. Because game console and PC hard drives are only so fast to be able to load assets into memory, and then memory is only so large as far as what it can handle at a time. I can't believe how long these church bells are going for. And then, the GPU, there's bottlenecks all over that led to this sort of optimization of these levels of detail. But obviously the easiest thing to do for a game developer, and the most high fidelity thing, would be to import that actual asset. That's the asset that you'd use if you're making, like if you're Pixar and you're making a film, you would import the ultra high quality asset and just wait for the render to go through, because you got all the time in the world for rendering. In a real-time game engine, you don't have all the time in the world, but Epic has this technology, Nanite, that can take that high density mesh and then model, and then only show as many triangles of it as are necessary. And I think the real key, at least for me, I don't understand this technology fully, this idea that in the demo that they showed, it's kind of like a Tomb Raider style game, that and they're in a cave and they pause it and they show all the triangles, and that there's about a triangle per pixel. So like, doesn't matter how dense the mesh is, you don't need to have multiple triangles. You don't need multiple vertices of that mesh to represent a single pixel, because a pixel is the smallest thing you can see. So they seem to be scaling it in such a way that, and in a dynamic way that doesn't seem to involve a lot of work on the part of the developer, the actual game developer or the artist. They're scaling. As you get closer, you're basically seeing more mesh, triangles of a mesh, until you see the actual maximum detail of that mesh. So they're talking like billions of triangles, and it seems like it all just works. And I'm sure there's going to be caveats and difficulties and complications to all this, but it's a really magical promise and premise that you can just have these finished assets, and then just pop them in the game, and you don't have to worry about your triangle count, because that's a lot of the expense and time making a game is optimizing models. Optimizing generating the assets in the first place is hugely expensive and difficult, and then optimizing them so that your game still runs in real time, and then maybe you have to do another optimization pass to get it to work on the Switch, or turn a bunch of stuff off or whatever. They're also talking about these 8K textures, so like really high resolution texturing, and then the other big tech is Lumen. So that's their global illumination. So basically it's ray tracing, real-time ray tracing stuff. And that is, we've been seeing that in the works for a while. As far as I understand, the NVIDIA ray tracing GPUs just weren't that good at ray tracing. And this next generation that we're gonna get is gonna be a lot better at ray tracing. So while we didn't see a ton of impact from, obviously not everybody even had one of these ray tracing GPUs to begin with. Well, we didn't see a ton of impact from that. I think it looks like it might just work in this next gen, where you just turn on global illumination. And that's another thing that I see as really highly simplifying the work that a game developer needs to do, because game developers have done a lot of tricks over the world to simulate the look of ray tracing. Like, one of the things they'll do is they'll bake lights. So if you have a game that each scene is only one time of day, you can bake ray tracing lighting information into the textures at development time, and then just ship all of those to the game. So that, that's slow. It's, that's a common thing, like, in game development. My light maps are rendering. But there's also a lot of other tricks they've used, and as many tricks as that they've used and techniques that they've done to try to make photorealistic games, it still wasn't as good as this global illumination demo that Epic has that looks like a completely pre-rendered scene. Like it looks, I mean, I think they were chose their assets carefully, and I don't know if everything will quite look like this. Especially the character didn't quite look film quality, but most of that game looked like it was just like, oh yeah, I'm watching a like Avatar or whatever. I'm watching a movie that was just completely pre-rendered, except it's a game. So huge advance, I think, in graphics. I think we'll see those sorts of games in like 2021, hopefully, or late 2021, early 2022. We'll see. And so a lot of this comes down to, obviously the new consoles have a lot more CPU, faster, better GPUs. And then a lot of it seems to come down to, I'm guessing, especially this nanite stuff, for these meshes, comes down to the storage speed. And then you just have a whole different paradigm that you're working from. And you can just do some really cool stuff. But all that said, that's just graphics. And what I think of next gen, I want to progress everything. And I think the perfect example of this is Minecraft. So there's, I'm sure you've seen this as well, a ray tracing version of Minecraft that's going to be coming out for the new Xbox. I guess it's also playable on the PC if you have the right graphics card. I actually need to test that. I really want to check it out. It looks beautiful. It's a beautiful visual effect, and it works on current hardware. And you do really have very simple geometry in Minecraft, right? And very simple textures. But they've made those textures more complex. There's this new concept called physically based rendering, where you have textures that encode very similar information to what, much more like simulating the real world with this stuff like subsurface scattering. Again, it's all about like, used to have to do a trick to make something that looked like what's real, and now we're much closer to just be able to simulate how light works. And so you get these very beautiful scenes, and if you're having a hard time visualizing global illumination, like a lot of it has to do with the fact that when light bounces, it carries with it color information from what it bounces off of. So if light bounces off a white wall and then it hits a sphere, it's going to illuminate that sphere with some white light. But if it bounces off a yellow wall, it's going to illuminate with some yellow light. And it's just really beautiful. And you can really see that in this Minecraft. But Microsoft treats Minecraft like Google treats chat products, other than the fact that Microsoft hasn't canceled or renamed Minecraft. Well, they've done a little bit of renaming. Actually, they have created slightly separate, divergent versions as well. Microsoft had, before Fortnite, like the biggest game on the planet. They paid $2 billion to own Minecraft, and they've done nothing. Like, in the scale of how big important Minecraft is to a whole generation of people, Minecraft, like the amount of actual new features that Minecraft has gained since Microsoft owned it are minuscule. And remember, Minecraft was primarily made by one dude, and then he hired a small team to help him extend it a little bit. But Minecraft is so interesting, not because of its graphics, obviously. It's because it's a simulation. It simulates, like, there's animals, and then there's breeding, and you grow food, and there's this procedural generation, and there's very weird but slightly functional water physics where water actually flows and redistributes, which is something, a lot of this simulation stuff you really never see in high fidelity graphical games, other than just, there's destruction physics, which is actually another big feature of Unreal 5. They've already announced some of that stuff for Unreal 4, but they were talking about that in this Tomb Raider-ish demo. there's destruction like physics, so like you can blow up an object like an action movie, uh, but you can't really you can't really build something that's physical. And Minecraft, Minecraft has this classic thing: you build up a pillar of objects, and then you break the object on the bottom, and then the pillar floats, right? Which is great. Like Minecraft has its own kind of brand of physics. They work. It's a very fun game. But there are so many more things it could be simulating. It could be simulating ecosystems. It could give the villagers like real personalities. Like one of the inspirations for Minecraft originally, and I think about this all the time as like what is my metric of a truly next gen game is Dwarf Fortress. Dwarf Fortress, when you start up a game, it simulates the like a whole world geologically. Like, okay, rivers are gonna flow and volcanoes are gonna happen or whatever, and mountains will rise, and so it creates a terrain through simulation. And then it generates a whole history of that world. And, kingdoms rise and fall, and there's tribes and families and heroes and all that sort of stuff. And then you start a game, and you just spawn with some dwarven settlers. All of them have randomized and interesting personalities and quirks to them. And if you treat them unkindly, or if the environment is unkind to them, some rampaging vampire lords or whatever comes to your settlement to try to kill you, like the dwarves will like become sad. Maybe one of their loved ones dies. They'll like lock themselves up in a workshop and create works of art. They'll like write on the walls. They'll like, you know, be mean or nice to each other. They'll have pets that they care for, and so many of these things are stuff that we never see in the majority of games. And it's very difficult to do, but also Dwarf Fortress is built by like two people basically. And I understand that like you want to go with what's safe. You want to make the Avengers of whatever medium you're making, What is the automatic thing that I can just put, Call of Duty 25 out and, get $1 billion of revenue. But I just think there's a lot of interesting stuff that games can do. And I'm especially thinking about this. What is easier to simulate now that we have these faster drives? We've got these better GPUs. Like they're simulating flock behavior for like bats and bugs and stuff. Like the bugs scatter away from your light using really interesting, I think it's GPU accelerated algorithms. But what if you had a school of fish in Dwarf Fortress, or what if you have real water physics, not just for the visual effect, but people have made computers in Dwarf Fortress using the water physics in there. And Dwarf Fortress, if you've never seen it, it's an ASCII game. It looks like it's a DOS game, right? But it like maxes out your computer because it will simulate the flow of water, and you can have these water gates and stuff, and you can actually make a computer. Before there were Minecraft computers, there were Dwarf Fortress computers made with like flowing water and gates that are all rendered in ASCII art. So I just think there's a lot there. And I've written a piece about this. I don't know if I ever even published it. I was thinking about this back when the last next gen was coming out and whether we would go in a Dwarf Fortress direction. And I think Minecraft is a perfect example. They'll just add like a new material type once in a while, maybe a new biome, but they're not really deepening the simulation aspect. And I think there's so much there to be done. And obviously there's some really cool games that have simulation aspects to them, but I just think there's a lot there. Okay, so let's go back to the more optimistic side of this. Graphics wise, there's some really cool stuff that's happening now. A lot of these games are being made with a lot of the assets are being made with photogrammetry, where you take a bunch of pictures of an object and either you still model it yourself and then you apply those pictures as textures, or you can possibly even automate the modeling from all the pictures you took. And I think this is going to be a huge driver of well, one, I think we could end up with kind of a unified aesthetic. If you're making a realistic game, um, it's just gonna have a look to it. I mean, that already kind of exists a little bit. Like Unreal Engine games kind of already have a look, and Epic uses has this bought this company, the Quixel, these Quixel mega scans. So this Tomb Raider demo is like 95% cave rocks, right? And those are all based on these Quixel mega scans, which is it's photogrammetry of like natural textures, and really of this one, just pretty much this one texture. It's this brownish cave rock, and it's and so I could see a lot of games like if they're going for the Unreal Engine 5 um, photorealistic look, they use Quixel Megascans for all natural objects, and then I'm guessing libraries will be built up of metal and glass and things like that, and you'll just and a lot of photorealistic object scans will exist, and it's something that I hope that you'll be able to do at home with your iPhone or iPad or whatever. You'll like scan an object, and now you have a game ready asset. Because again, you don't have to do these level of detail stuff. You just have to clean it up a little bit in the photogrammetry software. And so I think if assets are easier to create, and you have this one photorealistic aesthetic, there will be other aesthetics that won't benefit from this. But for like photorealistic games, I can imagine it being so easy to make one of these. And so obviously, there's still the gameplay aspect. And so, but it makes me wonder something that's been really fanciful for me, but like, I'd love it if when a game was old, let's say the sequel is released, if all the last gen assets and scripts and behaviors or as much as possible was just like open sourced. I know this is ridiculous. I'm sounding just kind of dumb and pie in the sky, but I think there's so much that could be done by remixing games. Like there's these new skateboarding games coming out, and they're really greatly benefiting from a modding community already, and the games aren't even out yet. They're just early access. I know one of them's called Session. I forget what the other one's called. But they're But imagine if you also had the Call of Duty guns in that game, and you could like skateboard and also have like a multiplayer shooter where you ride skateboards, and then you I don't know, you do a kickflip to get some shield back or something. I don't know. I think there's something that would be really cool about games becoming more about remixing pieces of them. And I feel like this is actually starting to happen in sort of siloed worlds. Like I think Epic is kind of, for Fortnite, is kind of turning Fortnite into this reusable toolkit that they can create these experiences out of, have these live concerts, have parties and things like that. But you kind of have this world, and then within this world, you have all these pieces you can use to make different experiences out of. But it would be cool if that was somehow cross game. And I don't really have any practical thoughts on how that's possible, other than the fact that my assumption that there will be sort of a unifying aesthetic. Everybody's going to start using sort of this high tier photorealistic, or a lot of people are going to be using this very similar aesthetic and level of detail, right? You can just take this high end model and plop it into your game. And so I would it'd be cool if you started having games that were remixes of other games. Yeah, I want the skateboard shooter game, basically, is what I'm saying. This is a bit of a tangent, but I've been thinking about this for a while in the terms of cheating, right? So most games right now that are multiplayer are, it's a client server typically, and you basically have the server as the central source of truth, and then the clients tell the server what they're doing. Like, I shot this person at this time, or I shot in this direction at this time. And the server, and then the other player that I was shooting at is reporting their location, and the server's like, you know what? I think that was a headshot, and then it tells us what happened. And so the problem with cheating is that my game client could attempt to learn more about the game than the server wants to show me at that given time, or just help my mouse out and snap to that person's head. So game companies are going to increasingly, it's a real arms race between the cheaters and the game companies. And the game companies are like really getting deep into the insides of your PC to try to detect these hackers. And it feels pretty uncomfortable to me what they're doing. And it doesn't even seem to be working because there's still just a ton of cheaters out there. I actually don't feel like I've had a huge problem with that. Maybe it's just because I'm pretty low tier Overwatch, but I don't feel like anybody's getting like constant headshots on me. Because if they are, they probably rank up real quick and leave me in my bronze swamp. But there's this thought like, could you have a truly peer-to-peer, trustless way of making a game where if you didn't have these centralized servers, how could you have truly honest peers? Or in the sense of like Bitcoin, I can run on a Bitcoin node that doesn't abide by the rules of Bitcoin. I change the code myself, recompile it, and run that node. And now my node is lets all sorts of transactions go through that don't match the Bitcoin consensus. Like I just print myself up 10 million Bitcoins and send it to my address. Like all software wise, that is all completely doable, right? It's almost trivial for me to create an alternate version of Bitcoin where I have 10 million Bitcoins. But I'm now rejected from the Bitcoin consensus network. When I try to send out, hey, here's me, here's my transaction where I just received 10 million Bitcoins, every other node, every honest node in the network is going to look at those. And even if they're not honest, they might not be my style of dishonest, They're going to look at those and like, I'm going to look through the history of transactions. I don't see where this 10 million came from. So therefore, you couldn't have received it because it has no origin. Therefore, this is an invalid transaction. I'm going to reject it. I might even like kick you off my peer-to-peer network. So is there something like that for games? So I've been thinking about this for a while. The one that comes to mind where this would work is something like chess, which chess has had, you can play chess over email. It's not been a difficult networking protocol for a long time. But chess, you know where all the pieces are. And there are a finite set of legal moves. So horses make the L shape, right? Bishops go diagonal. So if you transmit a move to your opponent, like my pawn's going through your pawn, and it's not one of those weird, en passe, or I don't know chess very well. We basically would fall out of consensus because I would be trying to tell my opponent about a game state that is impossible for his chess client to represent because that move is impossible according to the rules of chess. So is there a game that's more fun than chess? That's more like a little more real time, a little more imprecise, a few billion more things happening per second that is possible with that set of the rules. Like you'd fall out of consensus if you misrepresented your actions or if you tried to represent illegal actions. Because what's interesting to me about that is that if you could do that, which, that simple thing, that might be literally mathematically impossible. I don't even know. But if you could do something like that, and then you could run all the cheats you wanted. All that matters is that to stay in the game, a multiplayer game where you're abiding by a shared set of rules, to stay in that game,